like a podcast. I think that's pretty
that's
cool.
exactly the kind of thing that we were looking for. I don't think we envisioned the library podcast at the time, but and the previous board had done a bunch of surveys about what people were looking for, and at the time we'd been subject to a series of budget cuts as part of the city's budget, and so hours had been cut radically short. The space was getting old and tired. There wasn't the money at the time for the computers that people were wanting at the time. And the space itself was it was small. It was kind of cramped. The children's room was right next to the front door, which led to kids wandering out into traffic and stuff like that. So, and those renovations from the 80s had taken a really beautiful building architecturally and turned it into a very cramped and claustrophobic space. So they dropped the ceilings down from 12, 15 feet to 8 feet without actually improving the energy efficiency of the building. And it was you can see some of the pictures online. There's a history of the library that the Friends have put up online, and it was a tired space. And it wasn't a space that was in character with the Ferndale that we were becoming at the time. It really just didn't fit.
Right. Drab was the word that came to mind.
Drab was the word. There was a joke at the time that we could either renovate or we could turn it into a theme library of the library of the 1950s, and with a lot of people telling other people to be quiet and hitting knuckles with rulers and things like that. But we opted for the other way.
And I think ever since really kind of that sort of period, 2007 forward, not just our library, all libraries everywhere, you'll see articles every once in a while that say that libraries have evolved. Libraries are evolving.
Right.
But not without the help of their communities. We have to give that shout out because there was a group, the Ferndale Citizens for a Better Library.
That's right.
That got that started. And they proclaimed that this expansion was vital, that it would add to the quality of life. So I think if any library out there that isn't us is excelling, it's not without the support of their community.
Absolutely. And I think part of it too, and I have to give a lot of credit to the librarian community, the library and information systems field really changed and had been changing for about a decade or two before we made our change. You can really see when you look back this kind of fundamental shift from libraries as places to protect information from people, to keep it as basically an archive, where librarians' jobs were really to tell people to be quiet, to tell people not to get things dirty or messy. And it makes sense because it was an era when the physical instantiations of the information were the most important thing. There was a limit on information because it had to be on paper in books. And so when that lifted, when the web started to emerge, you can see suddenly there was this group of young sort of rebel librarians saying, libraries are fun. Libraries are places loud. Libraries are places where people get together. You see people starting to talk about libraries as a third space. So in addition to home and work, we used to have third spaces. They were limited, places like the Elks and the Lions and other, pubs and places like that. And as things opened up, people needed a non-restricted third space. And libraries became that space. And so as we were doing this in 2007, 2006, we were able to draw on all the best work by the Wayne State School of Library and Information Science, where a whole bunch of librarians here have graduated, which has really been cutting edge in a lot of that. So they were able to consult with us, and we found just an incredible number of librarians across the country who are willing to say, here's what you need to do, here's how you talk to people about libraries, here's what a new library could look like. There's a new generation of library architects who were thinking of libraries as spaces where you would have fireplaces and comfy reading nooks and so it really, everything kind of came together just as the city was ready to let the library board make these changes. And then we were able to take those to the voters. I think 69% of the voters approved the additional mill that we went for in 2007. And that gave us the seed money to contemplate the expansion.
Yeah.
And that meant not only sort of improved, expanded space, but it meant a new and more versatile kind of space. We were able to put a front space that could be used as public meeting rooms. We made sure the windows were big so people could see there was stuff going on. Those could be used after hours, before hours, for elections and for book clubs like the one that we've got and a whole bunch of others. We were able to expand the kids section off to the back, so kids had their own space that was far from the door, quiet, peaceful. Kids didn't have to worry about interrupting adults. Adults didn't have to worry about interrupting kids. And then we were actually able at the same time to make sure that when we did it in an environmentally sound way. And I'm really proud of the fact that we were the first city building to be LEED certified, which is I think it's leadership in energy and environmental design. Mm-hmm. So we have a LEED Silver certification. We have a green roof. We heat the building with geothermal pipes that go 400 feet into the earth.
But it is a third place also at the same time. It's retained the best parts of its old perception.
Right.
Author Josh Malin was just on this podcast, and he credited the library for being a place where he loved to work.
Oh, that's awesome.
Because it was this, of course, serene environment where others were working.
Right.
And there was a reciprocal motivation there.
Oh, that's music to my ears. There was one local business owner when we were thinking of expanding the library, and I said, what could we do to make the library better? And the business owner said, frankly, in its current state, you could just raise it and give me more parking. Which was a pretty sharp, that really told us what we were up against. And that same business owner a couple of years ago said it's really important to have the library here. So to see that kind of transformation, and the person in question wasn't saying that we should raise it, but was saying that given the inability of the library to fund the services that would bring people in and make it active, that it didn't seem like it was contributing that much to the community. Mm-hmm. So it's not somebody who was opposed to libraries, but it was somebody who was really pointing out the fact that the library wasn't able to have the impact that it should. And with the expansion and I have to say, a major shout out to the staff. This is just an incredible staff of enthusiastic people who love this place and who love the community. And things like the First Stop Fridays and
our concert series,
on Friday nights really turned this into a different kind of place. And it's a place where people go to hang out and people go not just to find books, which is all they would really do back in the 80s and 90s, but that they go there to talk to others, to work in the small meeting rooms and to have meetings in the big meeting rooms and to be entertained and to be informed and, all the stuff that we really wanted. It seems to be happening.
I'm gathering that you appreciate libraries.
Yeah.
Am I picking up on
I kind of, yeah.
And, I just wanted to ask personally, because you've talked about communities and how they impact communities, but how about your own trajectory? No one gets to be an associate professor without libraries being important in their life. Can you quantify?
Yeah, quantification, that's my business in other realms. I can give you some numbers. So my first kind of formal responsibility at anything in the world was when I was 11. I volunteered to the library in my hometown had a Adopt a Shelf program. And so I got the oversized books because it meant I didn't have to reach all the way up to the top. And so my job was to go through every month or so and kind of reorganize the oversized books.
That's
and
literally a big responsibility.
Literally an oversized, you might say, responsibility. And so, it was back in an era when being a nerd was even less cool than it is now. I actually think, a lot of those things have sort of acquired a certain at least social acceptability. Back at the time, back in the 70s and 80s, that wasn't really as easily done. But libraries were my place. Libraries were my thing, and books really were the thing that I spent a lot of time reading. And so, from there, in my own local library, and then in college, I spent a lot of time in libraries doing work. I met my wife in a library in graduate school.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So, and I had the delight of going back to that library 10, 15 years later, taking my kids, show them where I met my wife, and purely by chance, within a few feet of where we met, my doctoral dissertation is shelved actually in one of the shelves. So it's been a kind of a cool thing. And then from there we spent a good amount of time in Indianapolis, and in Columbus, Ohio. And Ohio at the time had really high per capita spending for libraries. And so one of the real I think the thing that made it incumbent on us when we got here to really work with the library was the Grandview Heights Public Library in Columbus near Ohio State that was open until 10 o'clock on Fridays and Saturdays. And so we saw what library could do.
That's great.
and the role that a library could play, not just in providing information, but in providing community.
That's great.
So that's been the case. My office at Wayne is in a library right now, and once we got to Ferndale, I think we were a little dismayed that the library didn't live up to the standards of the community, and so kind of quickly became involved. Shortly after we got here, the Friends of the Library got restarted.
Mm-hmm.
What we hear, though we can't find any documentation, is that the Friends of the Library, Ferndale Friends of the Library, is the oldest Friends of the Library organization in Michigan. We've heard that a lot. We don't know where that's from, but
I've heard that a lot too.
Yeah.
Either I heard that from you, or I feel like I may have read it inside the Ferndale Historical Society Museum. I should follow up on
the people who've told me, Jean Spang, actually, who was on the library board and is on the Historical Society board, she was pretty sure that was true. And given the way the city evolved and the place evolved, it makes total sense. Mm-hmm. This was the kind of place that would have an early, if not the earliest, Friends of the Library. So the Friends of the Library were starting, I think, in around 2001, 2002. And that led to my interest in the kind of library management and a position on the library board when it was advisory, and then from there, part of the board when it was appointed, and then when it was elected. So one thing's led to another, and this became something that I was really kind of deeply passionate about and spent a lot of time. It was nice because it actually became a learning experience for me, and I really felt like in those 4 or 5 years, I was able to get a good handle on the nature of libraries as a modern institution and the way that libraries were changing and dealing with information, but dealing with people. And that was the big turn for me. With libraries changed from being places where books are stored to places where people learn.
Yeah, and this is a podcast where I'm going to be mentioning the Friends of the Ferndale Library a lot.
Right.
They support us. They gave us this podcast. Can you? Because lots of libraries have Friends groups.
Right.
There's Friends of the Library Week. It's a national holiday.
Right.
Can you tell folks who are listening, I guess, what a Friends group is or does?
They do different things in different places. Right. An organization that's set up to allow volunteers to help the library do what it's supposed to do and to do things that the library can't do. And so, you all are busy with all of your various responsibilities. So when it comes to things like planning parties or managing all the used books that come in that we can sell back, or getting people into the library or hosting lecture series and so on, that's really what the Friends of the Library have been doing since their reboot in 2002. So I think we're almost on 20 years now from that reboot. And I mean, it's become really an active organization, and they've organized things all the way from the prom, the 80s themed prom that we had. We had an 80s themed prom a while ago.
We have
cake-offs, which were lovely. We've done some Day of St. George events back about 4 or 5 years ago, celebrating the Catalonian Day of Books and Roses.
We had mini golf in the library.
I think the Friends help out with the Halloween events that you all do. And I know they help out in other places. Actually, you can probably talk from your end about what the Friends do to support the library. But really, it's a place where people who love libraries give a little bit of time and energy to make sure that the library has the resources and some of that kind of enthusiasm, some of that kind of energy. And then when it comes time to talk to voters about why this is a worthwhile service, the Friends of the Library itself can't be involved as a nonprofit, but certainly the people who are engaged in the Friends become the people who are the biggest cheerleaders for the library when it turns to the voters and says, if you like what you're doing, please support us again.
Yeah, and that's clearly an endorsement for anyone out there interested to join the.
That's right. Oh, I would strongly encourage it. It's a great group.
To go back and then maybe for you to give folks a motivational pitch. If anyone out there is hearing this and they do like their library, but their community isn't supporting their library enough, can you talk about what kept you motivated? Because it was sort of a years-long period to get to the point in 2007 where renovations could happen 3 years, 4 years.
A lot of time with lawyers, a lot of time with architects. Actually, I have to say, with a few exceptions, it was fun.
Okay.
And so, for people who don't find those kinds of things fun, I mean, the idea of being able to build something, to be able to create something, I think was something that motivated all of us on the board. Like, we saw the opportunity to take an institution that that was coasting, and to really make it into an organization that could be a draw, a centerpiece for the community. I mean, we have this amazing location right in the middle of downtown, and the idea that this should be the kind of institution, the idea that public space as opposed to private space. We had a lot of people say to us back in 2007, 2006, well, why do you need this? There's a Barnes & Noble in Royal Oak, which is now gone, right? Because companies come and go, but libraries remain. They've got coffee up there, they've got books up there. Why do you need a library? Or as Amazon emerged, like, you can get your books anywhere. Why do you need a library? And I think what we've seen across the board, not just in Ferndale, is that libraries have thrived even as people were predicting their demise. Like these, if they had been just about books, they would have gone away.
Right.
And interestingly, at Wayne, I mean, what one of the things we've seen is that we built a really big undergraduate library. I think that undergraduate library now has fewer books in it than this library. Wow. It has a small section. They've done a really good job of curating the things that undergraduates want and need. But the idea of libraries as warehouses for information, the emergence of the web has made that unnecessary. And by making it unnecessary, it's allowed us to actually turn our attention to things that are more fulfilling for the community. So it was great that it was here. We preserved a lot of great books. We also preserved a lot of 70s cookbooks and other things that probably didn't need to be kept as long as we kept them. But we were able to turn this into really a kind of community center. And it's a community center with constant ongoing activity. It complements the Kulik Center and other places around the city. But really, I mean, this is where people go when they want to be in a space that isn't owned by somebody, where they can express themselves and sort of get information out and get information in, where they can learn and where they can teach and where they can enjoy one another's company. So it was the idea of building that I think kept us moving forward. And it was great. I mean, anybody who's doing this in their own communities, having a goal, having something you can pin up on your wall and say, that's what we're shooting for.
Destination.
One of the things we did early on, even before, it was probably a little premature in some ways, but before we won the millage, before we did anything, we actually had our architects do a 3D computer walkthrough model of what the library could look like. And I think for us, I hope for the voters too, but for us as a board, that was the motivating factor. And actually, if you look at it, I don't know if it's still online anywhere, but it looks remarkably like what we ended up getting. Yeah. Like the computer model actually really fits closely to what's there. But the idea, first, having a kind of vague image in our head of the kind of institution we wanted to be, and then a specific image of the kind of space that we wanted to offer to people. That kept us going through the meetings with lawyers and through the meetings with the city to negotiate the lease and the meetings to negotiate the snow removal and the interminable meetings to get this on the ballot and to meet with voters and to go to really every civic organization that would have us, to knock on thousands of doors. We were able to do it because we knew where we wanted to take this and we'd seen it work elsewhere. One of the things we did as we were building it was to take tours of libraries that worked. And so we went to places at the time that really seemed like dream libraries, like Berkeley and others, places that, where we're every bit, or I would say proudly more, to our communities. But having those active models out there and keeping that in our sights, I think was what made all of this work possible, and it allowed us to keep our enthusiasm all the way through.
That's good. Yeah. Civic refurbishment takes endurance.
That's right. That's right. No, these are long processes, but they are they're really worthwhile. And we had a lot of help. We had volunteer consultants. We had a couple of paid consultants. We had people who would walk us through. And one of the things for me that's become incredibly important over time is realizing that you don't have to invent the wheel, that the wheels are out there. And a kind of surprising thing, but something I now emphasize with my students, people who've done stuff are usually, like I guess I'm doing now, more than excited to sort of tell you just how they did it. Like all you got to do is find that person who made it work, and you probably can't get them to shut up. Like I'm getting that
all right, Kevin.
Across the throat symbol. Yeah.
All right, Kevin, shut up.
Yeah.
Now listen.
Yeah.
We've talked a lot about libraries. We haven't really talked about. We've talked about everything but books and reading.
Okay.
But we should talk about books and reading.
We should.
Because you run the science fiction book club here.
Running it is a strong term. I would say launched.
You beam them up.
Occasionally moderate. Facilitate. Let's say that.
Facilitate.
That's the.
Let's talk about that there is still a magic in recreational reading.
Absolutely.
We're here for
Oh
that.
God, yes. And I've really about 10 years. We're almost on our 10th year.
Yeah.
10 years ago, I got a chance at Wayne to teach a course on politics and science fiction. And I thought, wouldn't it be fun now that we have this new public space? It was just a couple months after we opened the new space. Wouldn't it be cool if we could do with the community? And I used it as a way of sort of forcing myself to read the books that I was going to assign. Like, if I'm going to assign these particular books, maybe I should have read them first. And if we have a group, I want to say in 2010, I think we started it up, and we went for a couple of months. And the library actually had a flood. The gray water system that was up in the attic leaked and really flooded a big chunk of the library. Unfortunately, that was the month that we chose to read the book after the flood. So I was blamed by the library for causing that problem. We made sure that when we restarted, we read the book Diamond Age in the hope that we would have that same kind of, what we're reading is what happens. I don't think anyone found any diamonds. But
I think we've grown into a diamond.
You've grown into it. Oh,
Yes,
that's it.
yes.
That's beautiful. But so we started it, and at first, I would show up, and maybe some other people would show up, and if they didn't, I would sit and read the book, and if they did, we would talk a little about it. But what's been really kind of cool is that we have slowly developed a readership base so that now we've got 15 to 20 people, and people take turns, and people are busy, and but we've always got at least 7 or 8 people, and but we're kind of slowly growing into an organization. When I started it up, there was an organization at the University of Michigan. They have a fantasy and science fiction reading group, and my goal was to get up to about half of their membership, and to regularly have about 10 or 12 members each time, and we're actually starting to kind of push that size, and so it's been really a lot of fun. And it's a lot of people who they love this particular genre. We can talk about why people should love this genre, but people who love science fiction, and so we pick one book a month. We do a kind of book selection process in June, and we go through, people nominate books, and then we kind of talk back and forth and negotiate a little bit and figure out who wants to read what. We take a big sampling of stuff. We try to make sure that everybody gets at least one book on the list. We've expanded it out, actually following Michigan's lead, so that now we, in addition to doing books across the year, one month we'll do a movie. This last year we did Arrival, which is a magnificent movie. And then this year we're going to be doing Children of Men, which is another probably one of the best science fiction movies of the past 2 decades. But we've done that, and we've also formally added a graphic novel. And there's a lot of great science fiction graphic novels. So we've got Spill, a graphic novel for this year. And then the rest is a mix of old and new. We're starting to sort of incorporate a little bit of fantasies. We do long and short. We try and alternate the long and short. So if we got a really long book coming up, the library's done a great job. So when we pick the books, Ed Burns makes sure that those, and I know the rest of you all, make sure those books get in.
Right.
Order those books from all over the place so that they're waiting. People come in on second Wednesday nights at 7. They grab the book for next month. We sit around and we really we unpack it. And it's not just about the book. I mean, every parts of the books lead to conversations about things that range from people's jobs to politics to their families, and just what's going on in the world. And people are like, oh, and I read this other thing, and so we talk about those things.
And it's so much more than Heinlein's Dune or
right.
Asimov's Robots.
That's right. No,
but
yes.
I have to confess to you,
Yes.
I have caught myself.
Yes.
This is full disclosure. I have caught myself online on the internet at a website.
Yes.
Reading a list titled Science Fiction Recommendations for People Who Think They Don't Like Science Fiction.
There you go.
And
There you go.
I think I am everybody.
You have caught yourself doing what we have not yet done is caught you in our club. And
But it's a genre people might think they can't get into.
That's right. So I mean, what's the pitch for me? I mean, for me, it was kind of one of those things, like when I was 11 or 10. In addition to being really into libraries, I was really into space and other stuff. My dad took me to see 2001: A Space Odyssey when I was about 7 or 8. Which is a sign of how little he knew about children, except purely by accident. I loved it. Like
Yeah.
it was utterly transfixing. I mean, this is a movie that bores most adults, and it should have bored me.
Our producer's raising her hand.
Yeah, it's it's a long movie. There's almost no dialogue, but
29 minutes of just apes.
exactly. Like the first word is spoken 32 minutes into the film, something like that.
Right.
So long film. They're long, interminable, sections of people sort of taking spacewalks and not talking, and and I absolutely was transfixed. I absolutely loved it.
You never know what your gateway will be.
That's right.
Into it.
That's right. And so, for me, it was about spaceships, and Star Wars came out a few years later. But and those were kind of cool. But what happened actually is in my college years, I started to move from the kind of space stuff. As I started to get more interested in politics, I went to school in Washington, D.C., I started to read more political ones. And at first it was sort of post-apocalyptic novels, like what happens if the world's destroyed or almost destroyed, and how do we rebuild after? But I found, and as I started to do graduate work in the social sciences, I learned that these books, they were about the things I was studying. So there were books that were about dictatorship, and there were books that were about sudden rapid transformation. Actually, we're celebrating the 30th anniversary right now of the Berlin Wall. And science fiction's about revolutions, and it's about sudden radical transformation. And what I realized suddenly was that there is an entire genre that it's about exploring what could happen, and in a way, by exploring what could happen, exploring what is actually happening. So for me, science fiction is that kind of storytelling that tells stories about societies, and I love stories about individuals and how individuals change their lives, and sort of ordinary fiction. But the special thing about good science fiction for me is that it tells the stories of how societies understand themselves, how societies change, how societies cope with problems. And so, for me, every single one of these books is a chance to sort of think about where we're at, why we're here, how it could be different.
Yeah.
And I'm still able to teach that course at Wayne. And in the last year, I've been able to modify it. So the last month of the course, the students don't have to write a science fiction story, but they have to do the kind of world building that science fiction authors do. And really, the final assignment is you don't have to tell the story, you don't have to have a plot line. But I want you to envision the kind of world where you'd like to live and how you would get there. And that is itself a kind of narrative process or a story. There's a recent book that's come out called Octavia's Brood, which is a reference to Octavia Butler, who's one of the
going to bring her up.
Yeah, one of the most prominent African-American women science fiction writers. And so this book is a series of science fiction stories inspired by her work. And the introduction, the first page of the book, the authors say that what we're really interested in is organizing for social change, and that all organizing is science fiction, because in order to become an organizer, you actually have to envision a different society than the one that we live in. And unless you can engage in that kind of speculative fiction about the world that you want, you cannot do anything about the world you're in. Like the Green New Deal is science fiction. Mm-hmm. And it's science fiction that somebody's trying to turn into political science fact. And so for me, the ability to envision the end point that you want to reach, you can't get there unless you can envision it. And then the really good science fiction envisions how men and women and children react when they try to get there, and how they overcome struggles, and how they marshal their resources to create coalitions, unlikely coalitions sometimes, for making those things happen. So for me, it's become an intensely personal thing. It's become an intensely political thing. I don't want to wrap everything that I do into the same package. So I do political science and I do science fiction. So I have to make them into political science fiction. But frankly, it's become that for me. And in addition to that, it's just the absolute joy of being immersed in a narrative.
Yeah.
Like take all the science fiction away. For me, whether it's reading a physical text or I do a lot of audiobooks, the ability to just kind of wash everything away, and become immersed in somebody else's very well told story, that's unparalleled joy for me, that I can find solace and I can find enthusiasm and joy in seeing how other people craft worlds and tell stories. So it's just been a lot of fun. But you're right, that social engagement around a common text around something that people have in common. I think, especially, for a lot of introverts, there are certain people in the world who can walk into any room and smile and greet and be happy. And there are other people, and I'm one of those people, who needs to have something to talk about.
Something to talk about.
Something to talk about. And then it's easier to interact with people you never met and you don't know.
Kevin, thanks for being here today.
Oh, thank you.
So very much.
This is delightful.
And I hope that we've generated some excitement.
I hope so too.
Whether it's in people to join a book club or whether it's in to support their library.
Absolutely.
And
I have to say, the thing that generates the excitement is you all doing this, doing all the things that staff does, doing the First Stop Fridays, keeping the doors open, keeping those great displays you've got of the new books and the really nice curated things of, like our staff recommendations, and just keeping a vibe. The vibe that you guys have here is, it makes people want to come in. So so speaking as a member of the community, we're thankful for staff. So thank you for doing the work that you're doing. It's a public service, and it's just obvious how much you all love it, and that makes it happen.